Alright, welcome everybody. So today we're going to start on the restoration of this old Heuer or Heuer, however you want to say it, vise. So these are forged steel vises, and this particular one I think was made between 1928 and 1935 or so. And the main reason for that is this. If you notice, the jaw that's moving there is the back jaw. I don't even think you can buy a vise today with a back moving jaw like this. I think they're all front moving jaws. So Heuer changed their design at one point, and what they called their front model, and they put the word front right on there, and that word front is actually still on their vises that they sell today. So this particular one is a 100 millimeter or 3-inch vise. It's the smallest one that they make, and I picked it up off eBay. It actually came from the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area, so it's not too surprising. There's a lot of German stuff up there. A lot of Germans settled in that area over the years. So we're going to try to do a full restoration on this and make it look real nice. So it looks like we got some casting marks here. So I believe that B is a Brockhaus. So the name of the company is actually Brockhaus-Heuer now. And Brockhaus was the actual forge that made these vises, and Heuer was the name of the guy who invented this design. So eventually I think they just merged the two names together. So we see that on both pieces. So obviously somebody was using this for some kind of painting purpose at one time. You notice this bolt right here. So the only purpose of this bolt is that when you reach the end of the travel, it acts as a stop. You can see there's a slot in this lower piece, and this back piece rides along some machined surfaces. There's actually one on the bottom and one on the top up here too. It should be, but it looks like it hasn't been maintained very well. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of oil on here. I was measuring this bolt, and it's coming out to an oddball size, at least for it being a German piece. It's coming out to 11/16, 17.5 millimeters. So it's not a 17 and it's not an 18. It's got to be a US bolt. So I think that this bolt is not original. It looks old though, so it's been there for a while. Alright, let's see if we can get her out. Yeah, it's coming. It almost looks like it's tapped. Or it's very, very tight clearance on that hole. So I guess we'll try and see if we can get this to turn. Yeah, it's acting like it's tapped, which is very surprising. It's definitely tapped back there, so we'll take a look at that in a second. Hopefully you guys can see that. I don't know if the light was showing it, but yeah, that's definitely a tapped hole in there. So that's unusual because the current models are just through bolted, and typically you don't see a nut on a tapped bolt like that. So I think that this is possibly been modified by somebody. They must have had some problems with it at some time. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this movable jaw out of here. So I think This piece right here must be the lead screw nut, as you can see that moving when I move this piece. So it looks like, looking down through this hole, that's where the stop would occur. And it looks like, yeah, the threads are just beginning to start on here, so they only threaded it as far as you could open it up. So this part right here is exposed, but it's not threaded, so that helps keep the gunk, I guess, out of the threads. So let's take a measurement here and see how wide we can open these. So it's just over 100 millimeters, so I would think that's probably about 100 millimeters, which is, you know, 4 inches or so. Alright, so let's keep going and get it off. Alright, so it looks like we're free. And then on this piece here, this nut should come out. Yeah, there you go. They definitely made it serviceable. If for some reason you ever stripped this or the lead screw, they look to be replaceable. I've seen some vices where it's actually built into the casting or the forging. The threads would be, and if you strip them, that's pretty much it. So this piece right here is a forged piece. And so after they actually made the forging, it looks like there was quite a bit of machining to be done. So they had to machine this hole out, drill a hole through there. They probably machined this slot in. It was probably solid during the forging. And then they have to machine these surfaces right here, which is what this job will ride on. And then the final step will be to create this bore all the way through this tube. So it's definitely not a trivial task to make this vise. And the same thing here, they would have machined this out probably on like an end mill, as well as that slot right there. Alright, now that we got that piece off, let's see how we can get the rest of it out. So I can see that there's a set screw here. So just cleaning out some of the gunk out of that slot. So I'm going to try to use my Ghidorah impact driver to see if we can get that out. I think I need a vise to hold this vise. It looks like it's working. Yeah, we got that set screw out, so that's what the purpose of these is really for, is for these delicate screws. So after taking that set screw out, if you look down in this hole, as I turn that, it looks like to be ball bearings in there. So I don't know if there's a thrust bearing or whatnot in there. Let's see if a magnet will work. Yeah, there we go. So there is a ball bearing in there. And let's see if maybe we got to remove them all in order to pull it out. So let's see. There's two in that one. There must be like a slot in there that these are riding in. I don't see any more in there. Yeah, so that was it. It's a very interesting design. Not what I expected. So yeah, they this groove right here is all those ball bearings sit, and it just basically acts as a retainer. Looks like we got a little washer. So there's also a groove, a matching groove in here I can see. So half of the ball bearing will sit in this groove and half in this groove. But this thing is dry, very dry. There's no kind of, doesn't look like it's been oiled since it was built. So I was looking at this handle a little bit. I don't think I'm going to try to take this off. It's going to require probably a lot of heat and maybe like a special puller to actually pull that stake out. So I think I can get to everything I need to get to by just moving this, so I'm not too concerned about that. I think I'm just going to leave it in. But it's good to see that this isn't really bent. These always seem to get bent from people over tightening. Alrighty, so next we're going to go to the restoration phase. Try to get all this stuff cleaned up. Alright, so back on the vise, I put these pieces through the sonic cleaner, and surprisingly a lot of that burgundy color paint came off during that cleaning process, so it must not have been a very high quality paint. But it looks like we still got quite a bit of paint to get off here. So I don't know what type of paint they used on these originally. My guess would be some kind of lead-based paint. So what I like to use is this soy gel stuff. It's a soybean-based paint stripper. And believe it or not, that actually has worked the best out of anything I've tried. We'll see how it removes this paint. And then we'll probably have to put it through the sonic cleaner again afterwards, because this stuff, it kind of leaves like a film on the surface even once you strip the paint off. I think that's good enough for the first try. So we'll let this sit for a couple hours and see how much of this paint it takes off. Alrighty, well, it's been a couple hours, so we'll do a little check here. See if any of this comes off easily. So what I'm going to use this Motor disposable scraper. I'm basically just going to use this dull end right here, so that'll probably minimize any damage. It's definitely getting off all this red stuff. And then this stuff, I don't think the rest of this is going to scrape off, so I'm just going to wipe it down. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll run this through the sonic cleaner one more time, and that should remove any of the residual paint that's on here. And then we'll move on to removing all the rust. Alright, so here's the pieces after going through that second sonic cleaning. But the interesting thing is this color. It almost looks like a field green. So I know that this set was used in World War II. And it's a pretty close shade to that field green German Army color. So I'm not sure if this was some kind of military vise at one time, and maybe that's why it was painted red. And then on the lead screw, I'm pretty sure that this is just all rust. I think it's supposed to be kind of like a polished type look. And I think I'm going to polish this nut up too to give it a little different look. So the next step is probably some rust removal. But there were some interesting things I wanted to point out in here. So it's surprising me that I'm seeing these burrs on here. I don't know, that specifically that one right there. I don't know if that's from where, because that's where that bolt would be riding, right on that surface. I'm wondering if maybe that was just caused by that bolt riding back and forth. But then you see this little bump back here, and that's kind of strange as well. And you can also see the end mill marks when they milled this out. So to derust this, I'm going to use some evapor rust. What I've typically been doing is putting it into the sonic cleaner and actually using the heat from the sonic cleaner to speed up the rust removal. So if I have time to set up the cameras to show that, you'll see that next. Otherwise, you'll see this derusted. Alrighty, so I got everything out of the sonic cleaner, overnight soaking in the evapor rust, and as you can see, it removed the rust on everything. You just remember how badly this part was rusted. One thing I did before I put these in there, I took this to work and to see if they had a tool or something to remove this, what I thought was the stake on here. And what it actually was is it wasn't a stake at all. What it was is they added this step here to put this ring on, and then what they did is they just mushroomed that out. So there was a tiny little gap in there that I could get a file in to file that mushrooming part off, and I just kept doing that until I could slip this off. And it left about maybe 5 millimeters worth of extra material here. And then, so what I did is I put this on a lathe and I just parted that piece, that section off. In order to replicate what they did before, I would have had to put this on the lathe and actually increase this step down another 5 millimeters because there wasn't enough material in here to do that mushrooming again. And I'm not even sure I could actually get this to mushroom out. I bet you that they had to heat it up to do that. So what I decided to do was to drill and tap a hole in the end here, and basically just hold this ring on using just a regular stainless steel screw. Now I know that's not a period type fix, but what I was more thinking about is anytime you move this vise, you really should take this handle off, because that always gets bent and it really makes it awkward to package up in a box if you ever need to ship it somewhere or move it. So adding the screw here allows me to just take off that screw and I can pull the handle off really easily. But nothing I did here couldn't be repaired, because I pretty much went to barely past the end of the screw in terms of what I drilled out. So if somebody really wanted to basically restore it to how it was originally made, they could easily just part this off and then put another step down here. You'd lose a tiny bit of length on the handle. So I was originally going to leave this paint on here because there was enough of it left that my thinking was that once I paint over it, I would be using a different type of base, probably like an oil base. And if somebody ever wanted to restore this back to the original paint, they could do it with some kind of chemical stripper. So since there's so much of it gone, especially up around the jaws here, I think what I'm going to do is hit this with a wire wheel. These two pieces really quickly, like a very, very light wire wheel, just enough to barely get that paint off in order to prep it for painting. So I'm going to go do that off camera, and I'll be back in a bit. So before we paint, we got a little bit of prep work to do on some of the surfaces. The main one is these are machine surfaces right here. Alright, well I think I got all the machine surfaces taped up. So I think this thing's ready to paint. I don't think I'm going to film the actual painting. I'm just going to hit it with some primer and then some enamel spray paint. I had some paint left over from the Hazet Assistant Restoration. I think I'll probably try to use that, because that shade of blue is pretty close to what the Heuer is using now. So you can see the evapor rust pretty much removed everything, all the rust off this piece. If you remember how dark this end was. So I think this is supposed to be polished. So I'm going to try to see if we can get anything out of this Blue Magic stuff. So let's see if we can get anything out of this. Alright, well, it definitely helped the Blue Magic stuff. But I think that's going to be about as good as I can get it without actually putting it on a lathe and just taking some material off, because you can actually see the original lathe marks in there. And same thing for the shaft. This is not wear. Those are all the original lathe marks when they created the shaft. But there's no more rust on it, so I think that's going to be good enough for me. So I'm going to do the same thing for this nut, but I'm just going to polish the ends of it, because I think that'll make it look a little different. So yeah, again, unless I make a modification to this, that's about as good as it's going to get. So yeah, I pretty much did the same thing to the handle without any kind of invasive restoration. I think that's about as good as it's going to get. Still looks better than it did. Alright, well, I just finished painting these. I think they turned out alright. So now we'll just remove the masking. Alright, well, I think it's about time for reassembly here. So we're just going to go in the reverse order. We took things apart. So the first thing would be is to get this piece back in with the ball bearings. So for lubrication, I'm going to use a combination of just some 3-in-1 oil and this Red and Tacky #2. It's a lithium-based grease, but this stuff has some anti-seize in it, which would make it better for lead screws and things like that. Just going to put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil on this washer. And then before we put that in, I'm going to use some, I'm going to line the inside of this bore with some of this grease. That's where those ball bearings are going to go. And then the same thing on this shaft, or at least this front part. Put that in there. We should be able to get that groove to line right up. And then we have to put all these ball bearings in that groove. So I think to do that, I'm gonna magnetize this small driver and then let the groove kind of catch it. Alright, and then to put this cap in, I measured the depth of this bore. It was pretty much exactly 10 millimeters. And then this is 5 millimeters in length. So we basically need to go like, 4.5. So almost 5 millimeters. But you don't want to go too far in there, or else you'll be into that groove. And you don't want to be too short, or else that one of those balls could end up in that little bore there. So I think I'm going to use just some blue thread locker 242. So remember how I was saying this bolt, I thought it was like a SAE or inch bolt. Well, after removing all the rust that was on there, I measured the thread pitch on here, and it's 10 millimeter coarse, which I think is 1.5 millimeter pitch. So I was like, okay, so if that's metric, why was there a 11/16 head on here? I went back and I measured the head again, and basically we lost about somewhere around 0.5 millimeter of material, which I believe was just the 0.5 millimeter of rust. So This whole head must have been covered by about 1/4 millimeter of rust all around, and the derusting process removed all that. So now it actually does fit a 17 millimeter socket. So I don't know if anybody else has had that occur before, but I think that's the first time I've ever had a bolt that was rusted to the point where the size actually changed on the head. And then the same thing for the nut will now also fit a 17 millimeter socket as well. So the back part of the vise here rides on these machined surfaces, which are actually, there's two of them. There's one up here and there's one up here as well. So it acts kind of like a ways on a, like on a lathe or milling machine. So I'm just going to use some general purpose oil on those. And then same thing on this, on the lead screw. I'm going to use some of this red number 2. So now we should be able to slide the back part on here. And then it's not really necessary, but I'm going to oil this little bore where the nut goes. And I don't think it really matters which way the nut goes in. So we just got to get this started. So now we just need to put this bolt in and the handle on. Then we'll throw this nut on the other side. Yeah, what that bolt's going to do is just act as a stop. So there you go. So just basically this bolt's hitting that end of that slot there. And then the last thing is to put on the handle. As I mentioned before, I'm going with a kind of a non-orthodox solution here. I'm going to use a stainless steel screw to hold in this ring. So what I'm just going to put some more of this 242 Loctite. This is just a 1/4 28 screw. It's whatever headline around. There you go. It's moving real smooth now. Very little backlash. We'll just wipe this down, and I think it's ready to be mounted somewhere. So I got this old woodworking bench. I think I'm going to try just mounting it to this for now. I think that's good enough of a spot for now. Can always drill some more holes if we need some more space. I got some old bolts here. Should work. So there you go. This will be the home for this vise in the immediate future. But it's kind of weird to see a vise with that back jaw just moving. Guess we can try to clamp something just to prove that it actually works. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that restoration of this Heuer vise. That's it for this one, and I'll catch you guys next time.